I put it this way, I ought to be praying for that thankful heart. We ought to be practicing thankfulness in our prayer life. It ought to be filled with that. Matter of fact, that is what thanksgiving is. It is worship. It is thanksgiving for the things that he has done. Great is the Lord. He does great things for his people. This is the picture throughout the scripture. And the difference between, as I've often said, non-Christians and Christians is the recognition of that and the acknowledgement of that. When we talk about offerings, I love Psalm 50. It says you ought to offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving to the Lord. That's the command. The ultimate kind of worship and sacrifice is saying, God, thank you. And then it says in verse 23, the one who offers thanksgiving as his sacrifice glorifies me, God says. There's nothing, I think, in Scripture that more fundamentally puts us on our place and God in his place than for us to be perpetually and chronically thankful. And you start praying and God starts supplying, you start to recognize what a great thing it is to fuel our prayer lives. Convicted of that recently in my own prayer life, and I think you and I ought to work harder at itemizing those things, recording those things, as I've mentioned in this series already, and celebrating those things with joyful thanksgiving. This is a we statement, not a him statement. It doesn't say, may he shout for joy, right? May he set up these banners in the name of God. No, it's about we doing it because you answered his petitions. Jot this reference down. We won't take time to look at it. I think I send you there in our discussion questions for our small group this week on the back of your worksheet. But jot down 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 through 11. Certainly if it's not printed there, if it is, circle it. But I want you to recognize how important it is in the Bible for us to be praying for one another. And I put it this way, widening the prayer circle as it is appropriate. And sometimes it's a question as to whether it's appropriate or not. But broadening that prayer circle for this very reason, so it can be not I shouted for joy when he delivered me, and I set up the banners when there was victory, but we did it, and we set up the banners, and we shouted for joy. In other words, when we take our prayer hurts and concerns, when we have our day of trouble, when we need protection, when we need help from the holy hill, from Zion, we need God to answer us, and we share that request with more people, God says he is greatly multiplied in his honor because more people are giving thanks to him. Follow this now. And that's a hard thing to do. Do we decide to share this prayer request? Now again, there's a lot of people you can picture. Abusing the sharing of prayer requests is nothing more than putting a megaphone on people's troubles and, discussing other people's, gossip, being a gossip. I'm not talking about that, obviously. And I'm not even talking about you being known for suffering in your small group, and every time you get together, it's always you sharing what a horrible life you have. I hope that's not the case. But when you have a real hurt in your life, and something comes into your life that is painful, and you're making a decision and on the fence, should I share this with some folks in my life, or should I not? Please remember 2 Corinthians chapter 1. When the Apostle Paul embarrassingly shared, and it is an embarrassment to say that the great Apostle Paul, who stood in front of all the philosophers in Athens, said, we were so despairing, we had such a crushing burden that we despaired even of life itself. So you felt suicidal? Our great leader and preacher? That's exactly what he says. And he said, we didn't want you to be uninformed of that, so that you would know that we've set our hope ultimately on God, and we shared it with you so that we might be helped by your prayers. So that, because he had confidence that God would deliver him from all of that, he said, so that many will give thanks on our behalf for the blessings granted to us through the prayers of many. He says, so my little band here had such a terrible time of persecution, and I within that felt the sentence of death, and I wanted to despair even of life itself, and yet now many people are giving thanks because of that. You're struggling with something in your life. I hope every one of you is in a small group. I don't think there should be hardly anything in your life you're not sharing with your small group if it's a day of trouble and a problem and something you're facing, and not sharing that. Not being known as the person who's woe is me every small group. But you got to be sharing these requests, and then when you do and God answers, set up the banner. Rejoice together in God's fulfillment. I don't know. Bake a cake. Buy a pile of Abba-Zabbas. Do something to celebrate. Which I got several. Thank you for my Abba-Zabbas this week. Which I've been told are hard to find. But I don't need to shop for them anymore. I have plenty. Which is great. Pray for a thankful heart. Man, we need that, don't we? I mean, we need to be as thankful and joyful in the answers to prayer as we were hurt and frustrated in our need for prayer. All right, quickly now. That's the things I think from our passage clearly in the first 5 verses we can be praying for. Let's spend the remainder of our time just quickly here looking at 3 ways that we should pray. And even the subtitle of this sermon, you can see, is about faith-filled prayers. Faith. It's not a cross your fingers kind of, well, I hope this is the case. It's a real confident praying. So let's put it down that way.